cat dead details later here on Beecher Please. Normally, at this point, we're a heinous trip at Warp 5. And my name is Joseph.
Boy, how I've missed that sweet, sweet Inner Light intro. I'm your co-host, Peter.
And Peter, you and I have embarked on an entirely, shall we say, unfamiliar shore this week because we are actually recording this for our patrons and doing a special episode of something entirely but not entirely random, and that is the 1985 horror film Re-Animator.
We were supposed to do this thing 7 months ago.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a Halloween idea. We're in hock to the people paying for the show. We're sorry.
It's April 2nd, 2023. We
should this one up, guys. We apologize.
Worth the wait, though.
Yeah, this was a very interesting thing to watch as both the craft of filmmaking and what passed for a movie. What feels not that long ago, but I guess is a long time ago, and maybe like why it is we like why Trek actors are Trek actors.
You say not that long ago. I mean, this thing came out in 85. I was 3 years old when this came out. So, yeah, this is a long fucking time ago.
Yeah, I guess I'm not conceiving of that as being like almost 40 years ago, you know? Like my brain hasn't caught up to reality.
So, had you ever seen Re-Animator?
No, this was the first time I've watched the whole thing. I've seen
Same here.
Clips from it, yeah.
And I cannot tell you for the life of me how I have never watched this before. Because back in high school especially, I was super into horror. The Living Deads, Hellraisers, Leprechauns. I mean, I was all over the place. And I really, really liked like zombie horror. And I mean, this thing's up my alley so hard. And I'll talk about some tangential stuff that I've done along the lines of this, but same way, like never seeing Voyager became this treasure trove to dig into in my, middle age, finding this absolute gem of a throwback.
I am shocked that somehow this escaped your vision if you were in that crowd. I think that's kind of where I had contact with it was, I worked at a movie theater when I was in high school, same as you. Was friends with people who watched a lot of movies, and I guess that's a bit of lore we've never mentioned. As you and I both worked at movie theaters in our formative era, and it probably is why we have such a desire to criticize media for entertainment.
Absolutely. When you're not paying for things and it's bountiful, then you get very critical. And
you're with other people who are doing the same thing, so you have a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. But I mean, this thing touches so many bases, and for me to not have seen it until now is amazing. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on with this guy. And first of all, the fact that this is actual Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, in the loosest sense, but yes. It's licensed. We'll say that.
This is all based off of Lovecraft. It was a novella called Herbert West, The Re-Animator, I believe.
Correct.
And normally Lovecraft stuff is not what you would call comedy, but in the case of this film adaptation, this is classified as sci-fi horror comedy. And I think that's three genre. Well,
I mean, it feels very correct. Like that. I like that description a lot.
The dark comedy is there. And what's interesting is that the comedy was not there in the initial revisions. When these guys wrote it, and this was screenplay, it was Dennis Pauly, William J. Norris, and Stuart Gordon, and then Stuart Gordon directed it. Initially, this thing was made in an answer to the cornucopia of vampire movies, specifically the Hammer Dracula stuff that had come out. And these guys were shooting the shit and were like, why isn't there anything for Frankenstein out there? And initially, this was wrote as a stage play. And from a stage play, it morphed into, it was supposed to be a half-hour TV series. And I forget who they said it was, but one of these contacts they had was like, listen, the only place you're going to get any traction with horror is in feature films. Forget about TV. And they convinced these guys to go for the screenplay, and they took the season that they had made for this story, condensed it down into a serious horror movie. And as the script was revised further, the comedy elements started coming in. But horror and sci-fi are two great tastes that taste great together. And there's a lot of stuff in that pool that I think speaks to me personally. And it bleeds out when we have our discussions in Trek, right? There's dark, dark places I'd like to see Trek go sometimes with space horror and stuff like that. And obviously they don't go through for it because it's network television.
Yeah, you're trying to retain a mass audience.
But you start talking about dark comedy or comedy horror, and that's an interesting thing all in itself. But I think the base story here, the sci-fi element, works great. And it's looking at the connection that Jeff Combs has to this, it makes sense as he's transitioned and pivoted hard into the sci-fi world.
It's interesting, when you were talking about the comedy elements entering into the movie, I just had only considered the comedy as unintentional when I was watching it. I did not think for a moment to step back and consider if the the overly hammy performances of the male and female lead were the point rather than something that happened on accident.
I think
But it
that's
makes so much more sense though if you consider it in framing making fun of Hammer Dracula movies. You know?
or just saying, we're putting a lot of big asks out there for the audience to go along with the story, especially in the time frame that it unfolds in. And you can ramrod things and try and play it straight, and I think then it comes off as stupid. But if you're willing to kind of go tongue in cheek and be a little bit self-aware and and put that intentional twist of comedy in there, you can make some real leaps within the story and keep the audience buy-in. And I think that's important in making um a cohesive story where you're not getting like jarred out or pulled away and being like, no, why? And it's, a goofy piece of dialogue, or how do you make a zombie cat look real and terrifying? You're threading a needle, right?
Yeah, that part I can see that was them trying to just find the right way to do something, and it's actually comes off as comedic on purpose there. But I always had assumed that the performances, which is just the most hilarious part of the thing, right? The funniest part of this movie is, who was it, Bruce Abbott and Barbara Crampton, and that they just have these like, oh sweetie pumpkin, we're working through our relationship problems while this horrific circumstance plays out all around us, right? Like I assumed, like, is this just that they were trying to do, this was supposed to be serious and they couldn't do it? Or what you've opened my mind to is, no, that was the fucking point. That's, they were making fun of Hammer. And if I had thought of it in the context of that it was a parody of something that existed then, that was this notorious cheap horror crap, oh, this turns over whole new vistas.
Yeah. I think you could throw a lot of Hitchcock in there too, especially with the score, the way that they scored it.
Yeah, I love
Uh,
the opening.
Absolutely. Um, and again, at the end, it's this Lovecraft story, and I don't know how much interaction you've had with Lovecraft, but here in Columbus, in the LARP circles, we've had some troop games run 2 or 3 Call of Cthulhu LARPs
Well,
as one shots.
yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, let me tell you what, man, they've crushed it. And one of them that I got a chance to play in was loosely set around Re-Animator concepts. And having played through the game in that module, which was bonkers and insane and so much fun. I could do a podcast just talking about the shit that went on there. Seeing this on the back end, again, really rewarding.
It's interesting, just on the thread you went on there on the Call of Cthulhu LARP. That's hard to do. In case you don't do LARP, that's hard to do because everyone has to commit to doing it. You know, you can't have someone in the group who is mocking it on a meta level.
Oh no.
You can't have someone who's trying to be quip or funny. You know, this you all have to play it straight, and to do that with a group of people you don't know and be able to pull it off and have it be satisfying, that's difficult.
Well, it's also difficult is when you and I cut our teeth, pun intended, on Vampire, and Vampire is very much a PvP environment, and you can't really win LARP, but you can win Vampire, right? You
Yeah,
can
you
be the
can.
cool guy. You can dunk on other people. Um, you can thrive on the failures of others, and
There,
especially in a
there's,
big board game,
yeah,
right, where there's an endless story. It creates a very conservative play style because you don't want to be the guy who steps forward while everybody else is stepping back, and then you get targeted and you get put down. Everybody goes on. So you talk about a one-shot Cthulhu LARP where everybody needs to walk into this thing with the full acknowledgement that you are probably going to die and you are going to go crazy in the process, and you cannot win this thing. And if you go in with the intention of winning, you're going to ruin it for other people. Everybody needs to commit to fail spectacular. And that's really the goal in that, is like to
yeah.
have the best "that's how I died" story come out of the game.
In bringing that culture so that people are ready to like jump on the appropriate circumstances is very important. So it's like a healthy thing for that to be the story you take away from it. And then you also have to be willing to play straight, like seeing something horrific and trying to create a genuine emotional response in the moment.
I would love,
That's tough.
we should get Clyde sometime if you want to actually talk about like full on, if it's something anybody would ever even care to hear about. But like Clyde ran these games so good and made props and shit where there were like monsters in the basement that were like these better than original series Star Trek garbage bag monsters with the lights down. And if you could like really go full immersion and feel the flow and see this fucking thing move out of the corner of your eye, like legit scary shit, like
Wow.
some of the best.
Wow.
Yeah. So taking those experiences that I had in that Cthulhu LARP, watching Re-Animator, and ignoring the laughs and the tits and ass and the other stuff, like this is a tragic story, and
Oh yeah.
there's a lot, like nobody comes out happy in this thing, and that is 100% on brand for Lovecraft. Like the dad, especially, Dean was his name,
Dr. Hazley?
yeah, Dean Halsey.
Halsey, yeah.
What a raw deal. This dude just cares about his daughter, and
He's just trying to make sure that you know, this guy is, you know, up to his standards for her, you know,
not
and
even there's a lot to discuss in this thing, but just how quickly everybody's having a pretty good time and life is great, and it just goes down the fucking tubes like that.
well, so I guess the number one thing in terms of the story of this film that you can point to is if you live in Arkham, Massachusetts, you clearly have no genetic ability to read red flags. They just don't exist because the main character of our film is Herbert West, who is played by the reason we're watching this, and that is the one and only Jeffrey Combs, our favorite actor from Enterprise, even though he's only in 4 episodes.
That's how good he is.
That's how good he is.
Let me ask you something, Joe, and this is going to be for maybe 4 people out there. Were you able to watch this movie and see Jeff Combs on screen and not immediately think Sean Bailey?
Yes. Yes.
I could not. So this is a guy that, speaking of LARP, that we've played a lot with, and I mean, just
Sean, if you ever listen to this, this is meant in all respect. Okay, proceed.
that it was such, because all the time I've seen Jeffrey Combs, it's always been with some sort of prosthetics on. Like seeing him young, especially with those glasses on, man, just a dead ringer for our friend. And like the way that he portrayed the lines, Eric Kine all the way.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That clipped, matter of fact, the tone just varies a little bit. It's softer, but not any less harsh. You know.
So this guy's, for all intents and purposes, Victor Frankenstein in a modern retelling of the story. Um, he is a psychotic professional, a medical student who had been previously studying in Switzerland, but was forced to relocate to the US under some very questionable circumstances.
Yeah, we get an opening scene that is of his former professor, like seemingly going through some sort of choking fit while dying a hideous, bloody death. By the way, this movie I would describe it as moist. It is a gooey one.
Well, let's sidetrack here for a moment. Did you watch this on my Plex, or did you
No, I just watched it streaming off of like Tubo or whatever, one of the
did you
free online cable services.
do you know if you saw the rated R version or the unrated version? There's a couple. Well, so and again, crazy product of the time for 1985. They released this thing without putting it through ratings. So they put out an unrated product because they were afraid that it would get an X rating, which certainly by 2023 standard, I think it
Holy
would have got
shit!
that.
I mean, we may be able to spend the entire podcast on the worst day of Barbara Crampton's life. Like, holy shit!
Different world for sure. But the MPAA rules were that you could not advertise for unrated movies. So ultimately, they had to release a cut for rating. So they trimmed down stuff and they came out with this version that was ultimately rated R. So the version I watched and the version you watched, there would be things like, here's a crazy gore part. And in the unrated, we are going to explicitly show what's going on. But in the rated R, we'll show reactions. Or it'll be like in the rated R version, you've got a wide view of the shot. And in the rated R, there is zoomed right up on the gore. So this,
Wow, I did not watch the R-rated version then because I got I got all lingering everything shots. Everything was there.
so
There was only just one scene missing, apparently.
Dr. Gruber, did you see his eyeballs pop and blow
Yeah,
blood all? Okay, so that's part of the unrated, and that's an example of like the excessive gore.
yeah, that's in the opener. Like they start you with that guy's eyeballs popping.
The nurse bring German police or Swiss police into a room. They bust the window out, come in guns drawn, and there's old Dr. Gruber scraping at his face in horror before, his eyeballs blow up, and then they accuse, you've killed him. And we get our first introduction to Herbert West. No, I gave him life.
The opening is a true throwback to the era when you would have movie openings at the beginning of your movie, something I have not seen a movie do in a very long time.
Um, Herbert West will relocate over. This guy has issues, but like I said, he's kind of the psychotic professional, always in the suit and tie, always buttoned up all the way. Sometimes he's got his sleeves rolled up. This guy is always ready for business. Pursuit of knowledge above all else. And he is a delightful dick who is going to tell several characters how he feels with
This
no fucks to give.
Like I said, this is where the apparently the genetic ability to read red flags in Arkham, Massachusetts, it's gone from all of its residents. Like this guy from Switzerland shows up. What happened to his old boss who's sitting over? His eyeballs explode and his face is a bloody mess. And he's raving about how he gave him life. Would you please continue to educate him? And they're like, all right, let's kick the tires on this guy. Let's see what he's like.
And
And
this
then
isn't a secret either, right?
yeah, none of this is a secret.
This is in his file because Dean Halsey of the Arkham Medical,
Miskatonic University, yeah.
yeah, Miskatonic, uh, has knowledge of why this dude's coming over from Switzerland. And as you said, ignores all of those red flags, brings him into the school, and louds him as the future of medical genius as he's given him a tour of campus. And that tour brings them over to a cadaver lab where we will meet two more of our big deal characters. One of which being Bruce Abbott,
He was
Dan,
playing Dan Kane.
very vampire. And this is going to be, for all intents and purposes, the relatable protagonist. I think. I think Dan Kane might actually be the main character of this.
I agree. And then the second main is Barbara Crampton's character, Megan, who is Dean Hazley's daughter, so we have already discussed. And we start with Dan trying to resuscitate a woman who's had would probably a heart attack and failing, and taking the body down to the morgue. And this is where we also establish the economy of this film, in that we have very limited amount of sets, and we can and will reuse them economically to make this movie.
And it
It's
makes sense if this was initially penned as a stage play, right?
yeah,
The scene where Dan Kane is trying to resuscitate the woman on the table in the the teaching wing. He's doing chest compressions. There's a elder teaching doctor hits him with the defibrillators. No go. Kane goes back hands on, and finally the teaching doctor goes, "We've exhausted all options. You need to stop." I don't know what the line was. A good doctor knows when to give up.
yeah.
And I thought this was a great scene, um, and kind of indicative in the entire film. It relays a clear message that there is a disconnect between the passions of people entering the medical professional that want to help, and then there is a level of burnout or kind of like time clock punching professionalism with the more experienced, where you've got this disconnect, and it's not about saving people, it's just about doing the job.
It's about getting your best outcome. Like when you're young, you want to save lives, and by the time you've been in the medical profession for a while, you've seen enough lives leave, seen enough lives you were unable to save, that you still want to do the best you can. You're still trying. You're still in the healing profession. You're probably better at it than when you were young, but you now know where the end is. You've seen it
You've
enough.
come to, death is part of the job,
Yeah.
and it is not the trauma of it arriving is not there. I found the discussion between Kane and that teaching doctor like very charming and simple. The script, the structure of the movie, and you mentioned before, like things that used to pass as media back then, like things are so angsty to a point of getting convoluted or just silly. I think seeing transparent scenes like this, it's a welcome feeling. So
Yeah, there's something comforting about the structure, right? It's I don't want to say it's predictable. This movie is not at all predictable if you have not seen it or don't know the story, because it's just in the ether around you, which is often can be with like these iconic pieces of media. I've heard of this movie a million times, right? I've seen scenes from it. I've seen references to it. But as I would not consider it's predictable in any way. But that said, there was a sort of clear structure, writing structure to it that felt right. I don't know how else to say it.
the characters are not out to zing each other.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody is a bad actor in this.
Yeah. We'll part ways there. I think Bruce Abbott and Barbara Crampton are very much actors of the 80s film industry.
Yeah,
Not
but
very talented.
I don't know, man. There wasn't really a point where I was like, man, Raffi's pulling me out of the scene here, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, she is one of the worst actors I've
But I've
ever seen
seen
in
a
my life.
lot of bad B movies, right? I've seen a
Yeah,
lot of them, and
same.
I didn't get that like that jolt of like, man, this dude's stinking up a scene in here. So like, I think everybody portrays their roles well,
Yeah,
if not
there's a different kind of bad you're referring to, and that's like there's a there's a big gulf in bad movies that are bad because of their, like Re-Animator is sometimes considered a classic bad movie, and it's not bad in any traditional production sense. It's just something about it is irreversibly weird or odd or didn't
sinful.
quite work, right? And bad in this unenjoyable senses, they were using onboard mics on crappy cameras, and no one is able to actually deliver on dialogue successfully, and it's like hard to watch from a technical perspective. That's like the unenjoyable side of bad. Everything about this is well produced.
Yeah. And that's not out of a big studio either. And that's something
Yeah.
else interesting. You know, right now everything you see is coming out of one of the big 4 or 5 studios. I don't even know what fucking uh production company put this thing out. Uh,
Empire International Pictures is what they're called.
I'm sure they got incorporated into Fox or something down the road, but again, the story with this, it went from being the TV show to saying, "Hey, you need to make this as a movie, bring it out to Hollywood, you know, with the industry, and we can really get some good special effects behind it." That was the big one why they had to do it in Hollywood, is that's where all the special effects stuff was there. And it's interesting to think about something this out there getting traction in Hollywood, which is, you don't really see that much stuff made in Hollywood because the cost is so high. Everything, you know,
Like
Canada, Australia, whatever.
the only production company that's doing anything like that is A24. That is it. Like the Witch, like the Midsummer, well, that group. They're the ones that are the only ones that are like doing low mid. Why you got a wild concept? Pitch it. You know.
And you know, look at those and look at this thing. Again, that inclusion of humor, like I feel like a lot of horror that is out now, the driving goal is to give you nightmares for 2 weeks,
Yeah, their horror suspense, like really trying to dig deep.
to make you shit your pants, you're so scared. And this was a delightful watch. I'm probably would have scared me as a kid, right?
Yeah, it is
Special
not horrifying to an adult, really.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
You know, there was nothing I was covering my eyes for. And
Oh, no, you know what? I was genuinely uncomfortable on Barbara Crampton's worst day of her life. I take it back. That was a lot.
yeah. And ironically, I think if I was a kid, that would be like the part I had my eyes open for the
Yeah,
most.
yeah. I think that was that one. That one got way worse.
But the silliness, you know, this is there's a lot in common here with Evil Dead, right?
Of course.
And again, it's that comedy beat. So
Yeah, and like Evil Dead's one where I felt like I saw that it was supposed to be comedic on purpose.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
this one, it kind of felt hidden until you shook me out into realizing it.
So you got Dan Kane who gets introduced. That's our straight lace med student who's you know, wants to graduate. He is in love with the dean's daughter, and that's a cool plot point too. So this guy's dating Megan Halsey, Dean Halsey's daughter. She's a beautiful blonde. Is she a med student or was she a nurse?
I hmm. I you know what? She is a med student because they were studying the same material together.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, this dude's dealing with real world problems. He's got to make rent, and he's not awash in student debt just yet. But if he doesn't get this roommate, he's going to lose something, and it's going to ruin his chance at med school. He wants Megan to move in with him, but Daddy doesn't approve of that. And even though Dean Halsey likes Dan Kane, and even though Dean Halsey knows Dan Kane's probably banging his daughter, it is not okay to move in. And that puts Dan in a predicament where he's got to look for an external roommate or he's going to be in some deep trouble.
I did like the way they framed him as a working class guy who really wouldn't be able to go to med school without this like apparent student loan that he has. Back when that would have been very uncommon, right?
But
We're talking, well, 1980s. This was another era of college attendance. People didn't go to college. It was something rich people did.
hmm.
This idea that middle class or working class people would have access to college was unheard of, and loans and scholarships were extremely sought after because they were the only ways a middle class family could really afford to go.
Yeah, because Dean Halsey seems to have some sort of authority over his student loan. Like that's controlled by the university directly, and
Yeah.
later on he has the authority to just revoke the entire thing. So what an interesting time capsule into the perverted educational system
I mean,
of the United States.
there was something to the complaint that unless you had greater access to higher education, you can't expect the level of sophistication and economic advancement on the part of your lower and middle classes. Like that was a real thing to fucking bitch about. You're gatekeeping all of the knowledge professions. We can't move up in the world because you won't fucking let us in because you're rich and we're not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's just maybe a little too far, guys. I don't know.
Well, they reversed it, and now everybody gets access to higher education and the crippling debt that comes along with it, so you can get your interpretive dance degrees.
Economically enslave yourself rather for underwater basket weaving.
So, speaking of gatekeeping, there's the bad guy, the intentional bad guy, because
You had to think about that one for a second.
Herbert
West
West is
definitely
clearly
the bad guy.
a um gosh.
He is an antagonist.
Yeah.
He's a bad dude.
He is Machiavellian, and he's crazy, and he is absolutely the driving force behind all of the death and destruction.
But he's also the second worst person in this film.
But he is not causing problems and sowing chaos for the sake of evil. His goal is the betterment of the human race, right?
Yes, he wants to conquer death. He wants death to be a memory.
He wants to add a viable tool to medicine to bring people back to life. And then you got Dr. Carl Hill, speaking of Dracula. And this guy's a piece of shit.
He looks like former U.S. Senator John Kerry to a T.
Oh, yeah.
Just dead ass.
So Dr. Carl Hill, we're introduced to him in that cadaver lab where he is continuing research on his new hot shit technology, which is a laser
scalpel? Yeah,
laser medicinal scalpel.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is 1985, so lasers are high tech.
Oh yeah, you're still cutting people open with bone saws back then. So we in fact see that happen during this film. Of course, can't help yourself, but it is also odd to consider how fast medical technology has advanced in merely 40 years. That these were common surgical instruments not that long ago.
So Dean Halsey, again, he's bringing around Herbert West, showing him what the campus is like, and brings him in where Dan Kane and Dr. Carl Hill are doing their thing. Because Kane's down there dropping off the lady he tried to resuscitate and couldn't. Dr. Hill's down there, his Dracula ass, testing this laser scalpel. And we find out that Dr. Carl Hill is a genius in his own regard, that he has secured many lucrative grants for the university, and that he's a big fucking deal. And Herbert West, turns out, has heard of him.
This is one of the times you referenced earlier where apparently Herbert West cannot help but stick his fist all the way up the asshole of every person he meets. and immediately tells this man, who we are led to understand will be his teacher, and therefore has direct control over his fate to become a doctor, that his research is plagiarized from Herbert West's old mentor. Which, if you know anything about academics at all, you know that is possibly the worst insult you can levy.
He says, not only have you plagiarized my former, and this is the guy whose eyes Herbert West exploded with reanimation goo, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think you're a hack fraud, Mr. Kurtzman. I mean, Dr. Carl Hill. And in fact, your papers are illegal outside the US because the high level of plagiarism you've done to this other thing. But his main gripe is Dr. Hill's assertion that the brain's, how do you phrase it? That the brain dies after 6 to 8 seconds?
6 to 12 minutes.
Oh, minutes, right.
Yeah.
Whereas West believes that the viability of the brain survives much longer. And Dan Kane's sitting there watching this new student tell off Dr. Hot Shit Carl Hill. Like, dude, what? And Hill's kind of just like, well, I'll be seeing you around, motherfucker. We'll see how...
We're going to have a real conversation later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can already see like I'm going to do everything I can to make your life hell, kid. You've earned it from the jump.
Well, his life and everyone else. So I think they have their little classroom session first where West is snapping pencils.
Yeah, just snapping him every time he says something he doesn't like.
They're doing this this cadaver lab.
Just staring him down like a psycho.
While this guy's talking. Meanwhile, Dr. Hill's over there showing how to make an incision on the back of the skull. And this was the only visual effect that really gave me a hard time, I think. And it was peeling the scalp back over the skull to expose the bone. That was a rough watch. And Joe, back in high school, I did a 1-month internship for the Cuyahoga County Coroner's Office. I saw a lot of gross shit. Saw a lot of gross shit. I saw a lot of horror movies, and that I actually took my eyes off the screen for that part.
That one was like, nah, I think we're not doing this. We're not bringing that memory back. No.
So while he's doing that, yeah, Herbert West is just mad dog staring him down, bringing up these pencils and snapping them, knocking Hill off his game. To the point Hill wraps class early, and West jumps up his ass and is like, you're a liar, you're a fraud, you're filling these poor students' heads with nonsense. The brain's still good way longer than 8 to 12 minutes. And then Hill's like, I'm gonna fail you, motherfucker.
Just right, yeah. You just what already day one. Here you are.
You're a problem. I'm gonna fail you.
Already talking shit. I mean, what's wrong with you?
Jump back over to Dan Kane's pour. All right. There he is having some sexy time with his girlfriend Megan Halsey, Barbara Crampton. The first scene where we meet Kane, where he's doing the chest compressions, I guess it would have been cadaver at that point. The med patient laying on the table, shirts open, boobs out. I'm like, oh yeah, right, 80s. Okay.
They're just gonna be hanging out.
Go to him having sexy time with his girlfriend. Like, she's hiding under the sheet. They're pretty coy about it. Okay. You sure you don't want to move in with me? It'd fix a lot of problems. No. Hey, let's get married. Well, that gives her some pause. And then, again, interesting dichotomy, right? There's the scandalous thing going on where Dan Kane is dating the dean's daughter. It's inappropriate, but it's acknowledged. And it casts a shadow on a lot of stuff later on. That's all, I think, good parts of the script, because that's going to feed into some problems that Dean Halsey's going to have, which Hill compounds. It's a neat scandal.
Yeah, her hesitance to commit to that seemed more based on, I know what will happen if I make this serious, and I don't want to do that yet. then I'm rejecting you. Like they definitely try to like make the relationship, you know,
Genuine.
yeah, very genuine. They're very close, but she's just more aware of their social difference than he is, and that seemed to be the reason.
I thought it was because her dad was like this steadfast Puritan, and that, you know, there was this religious undertone in the house, and that despite whatever else was going on, like she could not live with him before marriage, and she was not willing to tie the knot with him until he graduates med school. So now we see what Dan Kane's journey needs to be. Finish med school, get the girl, and have a wonderful life. Also, like you said, he's broke. And he is pursuing a scholarship, which we'll later see that Dean Halsey and Dr. Hill judicate over, and that'll be a big deal. But in the interim, he's got to fill that extra room in the apartment. And as she gets up to start putting on her clothes, and we get some side boob there with nipple, and I'm like, oh, right,
80.
80s. And again, it's still very interesting, too, from like the nudity standpoint. Like, they're being so coy about it, especially in what happens in like the later part of the movie.
I was going to say, did you know about that scene?
No fucking idea. That all
Oh,
hit
okay.
me. That all hit
I
me flat-footed.
I knew about the existence of that scene because Barbara Crampton is a scream queen, notable actress, and she has spoken about the scene, which you would expect, right?
Sure.
So I knew it was coming. I'd never seen it. I'm like, okay, I had no idea it was going to be quite that bad. Um, it's interesting that you had no concept of what you're getting yourself into.
No. Uh, West shows up on the doorstep as they're getting dressed, flashes some money at Kane. Now, Megan Halsey, she knows a red
Yeah,
flag when she sees it. And however
she's the one
stupid all the
person in
guys
all of
are,
Arkham. She's the only one who can see a red flag. Like, this guy's fucking weird. Don't let him live here.
and because it's the 80s and she's a girl, everybody basically ignores her
Yep.
as she makes common sense observations every fucking step of the way. And it's like, do not let the psycho in the house. And Kane's like, I need that money. And Wes is like, cool, all my shit is outside. I'm going to move in right now tonight. Also, I really like your basement.
And I just don't want to be. I want to be left alone. Never come down here. Never
Mm-hmm.
go into my room. I will pay you on the first of the month, and otherwise ignore you. Do we have a bargain? You're like, oh yeah, this is fine. This guy's totally normal. Everyone in the entire town, aside from Barbara Crampton's like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck?
So flip over to the little scholarship meeting, right? Dr. Hill's over there meeting with Dean Halsey. They've got some business to discuss.
We got some wine. They're talking.
Wine talk, and we find out that Dean Halsey's wife had passed away and that his daughter has been living there, cooking the food, keeping the house clean on top of all of her studies. What a gem she is. She comes down to say goodbye. Kane shows up to pick her up, and then Halsey starts hitting her with the fucking creep rays. I'm
You
sorry,
mean
not Halsey, Kane. Dr.
Hill?
Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, John Kerry. So John Kerry starts definitely speaking about her in a lustful fashion, but without crossing the line of like outwardly saying you're hot, you know? Starts waxing philosophically about her beauty and sort of trying to put uh, Dan Kane down a little bit.
Oh, hard.
Yeah.
And once Kane and Megan take off, Dr. Hill starts laying into Halsey. You know, that Kane's no good because he's hanging out with West, who's a little motherfucker, and he's a poison, and he's tainting Kane, and both of them are exposing your daughter to corruption. And he starts really going hot and heavy on it. And the camera position changes during this conversation they're having at dinner to like hit him from the front but low, so it's like
Yeah.
hitting his face with this real soft lens with like dark shadow vibes. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And that's where I think like more of the Lovecraft starts bleeding through, because for all intents and purposes, like Dr. Hill has dominate and is able, I believe that through the portrayal of this movie that like whatever his medical specialty and whatever understandings he has, like this dude's able to hypnotize people.
It is sort of the payoff at the end, right? Like I think you're onto a thread here because the movie doesn't even try to explain why the later zombified Dr. Hill is able to exert mental control over all of the lobotomized zombies.
Or even his own fucking body.
Yeah. But he does. He just does it. So this is again the Lovecraft part is like why is Dr. Hill this way? Does he have like a bit of a mystical power? And that's very Cthulhu. That's very in the genre of the source material there of yeah, there's something weird about Dr. Hill on a metaphysical level. He just seems to be able to do things for which there's no explanation.
Because he takes Dean Halsey, who is an all-round nice guy, and he says, "This Dan Kane guy, you're sweet on, that your daughter loves. He's a piece of shit and he's a threat, and he needs to go." And kind of repeats himself, and it's this very weird scene. And by the end of it, Dean Halsey's like been conditioned or mesmerized by what Halsey said, and like crushes his glass of wine. Is like, she's in danger. Like he's converted him over.
Yeah, and there's no discussion about why that scene plays out that way. And it really rewards you if you know the genre that this comes from. Like you know the author, you know the source material. Otherwise, that probably makes no sense. And it'll be interesting, by the way, to hear from any non-Cthulhu fans who watched the movie and maybe had that as a question. Is this were you aware of the mythos of the story is set in, and therefore that didn't seem odd to is did that seem more odd to you than it would have to us?
Because everything else in this that goes awry is the result of science.
Yeah.
It's the laser scalpel lobotomies. It's the reanimation serum. It's chemicals. It's technology. But yeah, what Hill's got going is most definitely like supernatural.
Yeah, he takes what Herbert West doesn't fucking taste to 11 immediately.
Herbert West, meanwhile, you know, we're finally going to get to see behind the curtain what's going on there. The house cat, which has just been lovingly jumping on people trying to have sex all movie, has turned up missing. Megan's expressing that she does not like West, that he needs to go, and that Dan needs to be real careful because he's going to ruin his life. They go looking around. Wouldn't you know? They find, what the hell's the name of the cat?
Oh yeah, it was something very.
I wrote it down. Where's this fucking cat's name?
Here.
Fridge cat. Spruce? The cat, I feel like real. Well, whatever. I never remember anybody's name. Damn, if I remember a fucking cat's name.
Because the cat hated West, and this is why, of course, I hate Herbert West, and he kills the cat. I love cats, by the way. I'm sure most of our viewers know this.
So they start poking around. Also, 1985 product placement hasn't really been tapped yet. Do you see like the number of things floating around this movie that I'm sure there was no paid advertisement? It was just like,
not a bit. Just with what they had.
We need, this guy just moved in. We need boxes. So there's like, I don't know, Dial soap or Irish Spring or something. There's all sorts of crazy things that I like, Pepsi cans, beer cans. I think he's wearing a Nike shirt. And I'm sure none of this is a licensed product placement at all. But they poke around West's room. They find a little fridge. And wouldn't you know, Mr. Snuggles, he's in the refrigerator.
It's where you see Herbert West try to dial down his crazy a little bit to try and explain what happened in a way that I guess approximates human emotion, but is very much being done from a, shall we say, distant position. Jeffrey Combs is great. He is a great actor, and he is playing a stone cold psycho very convincingly. I mean, it's just, he does a great job in doing what he is told here.
Absolutely the line of the movie here. You know, he shows up right as they're going through his shit. He is irate that they have walked into his bedroom. They're standing there holding the fucking dead cat that he murdered. Like, what the fuck? And like, he is mad. I've worked with this guy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, just people. I described him before in terms of like the EMH, just like not able to make that genuine human connection and understand like how to read a room and understand how the world works. But they're like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, listen, the cat knocked over the trash and got its head stuck in a jar, and I had to go to work, and I didn't want to just leave it there. He starts hitting him with some fucking logic lies. Like, I didn't want to just leave him there for you to find. So I put him in the refrigerator because I didn't want him stinking up the house. And what, you couldn't leave a note? Like, well, what would the note say, Dan? Cat dead?
Dead details
Details
later.
later? Which that can be the title of this episode.
just just the line hits like a brick. It's awesome. It's just right there, right in
Mm-hmm.
front of you. Like, oh, he's got a point. Like, yeah, what would you write in the notes?
And by the way, what the fuck is this jar of glowing green mutagenic secret of the ooze?
I don't suppose this gives me spider powers, does it? Is it one
Mm.
of those, or is it one of the bad ones?
Get out of my room. And off he goes. Uh, later that night, West is going to reanimate the cat. Kane will wake up to some terrible noises, goes down in the basement where he falls down the stairs and finds West under attack by a demonic possessed cat. And that's where we find out that when you bring things back from the dead, they're not happy.
Yeah, they come back angry. They come back like, you've interrupted my peaceful sleep, and now I will seek my vengeance upon you.
Mhm. I mean, you're 8 out of 10 chances that's how a cat's going to wake up anyways.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fact check true.
So the cat's going crazy. They kill it, and that's where West successfully recruits Kane into his insane journey, right? And this is where the scene earlier on with Kane and the teaching doctor becomes important because West is like, I'm a lunatic. I killed your cat. I've brought it back to life. We killed it. Its brain is hanging out and its back is broken. I'm going to reanimate it again where it's clearly in pain and not happy. But I have now proven to you that my reanimation serum works, and I'm going to give you this promise that we can help humanity. This is a medical tool, and you and I can unlock its full potential. I need your help. And Kane
This
looks at his dead, mutilated cat laying there, suffering in agony, and he's like,
fuck yeah. You know what that is? That's not succeeding on your SAN roll. You know, like, you get those insanity points in Call of Cthulhu when you see something you shouldn't see, right?
that's an interesting way to put it. That, the loss of sanity in that game is usually like, I'm closer to death. This is damaging me, but alternatively, it's like I'm unlocking new character choice possibilities.
I'm learning things about the world I'm in, right? And that's the balance you have to strike when you're actually playing Call of Cthulhu. Is there's a certain amount of insanity you're simply going to have to accept
Hmm.
if you are going to try and succeed within the plots. That's the only way you can get from A to B, and it's about trying to manage how much you're exposing yourself to in order to still deal with the problem and actually potentially survive the encounter. In this case, this is little Dan Kane taking his first look into the Necronomicon and saying, I like what I see and I'd like to read more.
Interesting. Is there an index?
Yes, let's go on.
I would like to know more. West's desire to link up with Kane, interesting, because his initial meeting with Kane, he doesn't even bother to shake this guy's hand and just completely blows him off. By this point, I think there's an earnest respect that West actually has for Kane. Like, it doesn't ever feel like West is just simply using Kane as a stepping stone.
He might have at some point detected that Kane is susceptible to him befriending or treating him with this respect. because he's not receiving it from anyone else, because he's like someone who's trying to climb up the ladder, and he's not really getting the respect of the folks that he is becoming the social peer of.
He says, you know, you're a hard worker. You've got access to areas that I don't, socially speaking. And I think again, I don't think West views himself as a monster. He's trying to help humanity at whatever the cost is, and sees that Kane is another person that has this genuine desire to help. So they are strategically aligned. And Kane, who has now been converted, you know, he's seen the promise. He's drank the Kool-Aid and goes, you know, I'm going to go talk to Dean Halsey. I think we've really got a great opportunity. Not knowing that Halsey has been dominated by Dr. Carl Hill and is now flagged for PvP.
So he goes to this man he thought was going to be his prospective father-in-law, was already pretty close to, you know,
Again,
on a personal and
Halsey's
professional
like,
level.
hey, you should apply for that scholarship. You're a shoo-in. It's going to do great things for you.
And without any other conversation since leaving their relationship on a good note, except for Dr. Hill's dominate, he says, after getting the story, it's like, okay, well, this thing you've just described to me is so batshit insane. I am going to demand you apologize. I'm going to make you like knock you down pegs in terms of your professional aspirations. You're going to have to write like a letter before I'll reinstate you. And I'm taking away your student loan, which is essentially forcing him to leave medical school because he can't afford to go otherwise.
And also, West is kicked out of school. He
Yeah,
is
Ed West is just straight up expelled. Fuck him.
Kane like, whoa, what's going on here? Uh, Halsey's not having any of it. And again, it's such a stark turn on a dime between his last interaction that it really does reinforce that Dr. Hill has mesmerized him. He leaves dejected. He sees his girlfriend out in the hall. Your dad just kicked me out of school. We're fucked. But man, oh, I'm sorry. During all this, did I mention that Megan walked in right as they were reanimating the cat? Her mutant ability, whereas Dr. Hill can like dominate people and hypnotize them, Megan Halsey, in addition to having the only amounts of common sense out of anyone in this, uh, she's like a long shot, right? She's a probability mutant. And she just walks into every scene at the worst possible moment.
Yeah, like reverse luck.
She sees what this stuff can do. She sees that it's no good. She sees that Wes is a nutbag, and she sees that her boyfriend is walking down a street right to hell. She says,
It,
"Hey, you got to get out of here. I can talk my dad out of this, but we need to do big time damage control, and you need to stay the fuck away from West."
I mean, she does say, like, I know this looks dark, but we can get you out of this, but you need to stop fucking around with the guy that, with the crazy reanimation juice. You just need to let that play out by itself. Like, she's lived in this town long enough. She's
Mhm.
seen the weird shit. She knows the rhythms of the night in Arkham, Massachusetts. Don't go
She's
fucking near that guy.
And whatever you do, do not smuggle him into the fucking morgue so he can start a zombie apocalypse with his crazy green Kool-Aid. Guess what Dan Kane does?
There's a lovable big black security guard next to the morgue. He's just like, I'm gonna go get me
Smoking in the hospital,
smoking, listen to the radio, like,
porn mags on break.
yeah, like, I'm gonna go get me a sandwich. I'll be right back. Just like total normie.
They sneak Herbert in, West into the morgue. They find the most freshest cadaver they can, and they prepare for their first their first US based human trial of the reanimation serum on a human. And so we begin our zombie apocalypse phase.
They pick out like a random guy who just died recently for no reason and inject him full of the juice.
Doesn't
and then
work. So
doesn't
you do
work.
the reasonable thing.
Double the dosage. Give them more of the juice.
What's the worst that could happen?
While they're in there, they're getting found out by the dean, who's trying to bang down the doors. He's very insistent and he's very pissed off. It kind of lends more to like he's almost being compelled to be there because he hasn't like finished ruining this guy's life or career yet.
Listen, I get it at that point. Like, you are the boss and you told everybody, hey, I fired this guy. Don't let him on the floor. And nobody has followed any of your directions at all. And now they're in there fucking around in the morgue. So yeah, he's banging on the refrigerator door. And once you know it, your triple dosed patient zero wakes up and he ain't happy.
He throws beatings on both Dan Kane and Herbert West, but those beatings are nothing compared to the titanic strength as she beats down the morgue steel door, crushes the dean with it, and then basically just WWE's his ass around the room until he kills him by pulverizing him.
I think it's the first time I've ever seen in a movie where the Terminator thing happens and that's like the bad monster picking someone up and throwing them about, which is normally like how you keep the hero alive, because like if Terminator grabs you, he can just crush your skull in his hand, right? Or just
Right.
punch you like a jackhammer and kill you. But if he just throws you around, then you can finally get back over to your shotgun and shoot him. Not Dean Halsey. He gets thrown on the wall, picked up, slammed against the wall until he dies. They take him out with a circular saw, carve his heart out. Hey, look at that. We got a new fresh body. We went way too heavy on this first guy. Wes is like, listen, we got a chance to save this guy. Like, Kane's like, oh my God, I'm done with this. This is like, this is,
Holy shit. Now, like, first we made a zombie, second to kill my would-be father-in-law.
this is awful. I'm
This is
done
real
with
bad.
you. But then
Yeah.
Kane's like, listen, dude, it doesn't have to be like this. We can bring him back to life. This is like the whole point is help me get him up on the table. And Kane's like, oh yeah, that's right.
Oh, we've got that juice that makes people alive again.
Yeah, get that fucking highlighter you bled out over in the water, that UV light on it. They bring back Kane with a
No,
very
Halsey.
Halsey. They
Yeah.
with a much better metered dosage. But as we see again, people that come back from the dead, they're not the same.
So the difference, so the first corpse was just a range monster until West cut its heart out, and it just beat the dean to death against the wall. And the dean wakes up and he's mostly incoherent, but not as violent, I guess.
And through all of this, West's like, you saw with the first zombie, like, it recognized the words I was speaking. There was some sort of cognition going on there. Kane's like, no, it was like animal instincts. Halsey, it's different. He gets up. He's not immediately attacking everybody, but his daughter comes down, reacts to her presence. This is not the Dean Halsey that we know. There's something fundamentally wrong here.
Yeah.
And as the security guy shows up, West and Kane spin a tale that Halsey's gone insane, and off he goes to the nut house.
He definitely feels like he's in some sort of weird manic fit. He's like recognizing the world around him in a limited fashion, but that's it. And yeah, somehow the police of Arkham don't throw these two in prison for what they've done. Apparently, all they do is talk to them. Very, very, very easygoing police there in the middle
It's
of Arkham.
85. Yeah,
Yeah, it's 1985. They got other crimes to deal with,
sure.
serious crimes. And so everyone just goes home after this. But we've got Dr. Hill talking about Dr. Hazley, who's, like beating himself against the padded doors and him being incredibly sinister and weird.
Yeah. Unfortunately for old Dean Halsey, he is under the care of Hill, who the story has already shown is got some naughty feelings for Halsey's daughter. So Halsey being out of the picture means that Hill can do as he pleases. And he goes, "Hey, listen, Megan, I need you to give me consent because I want to do exploratory surgery and poke around your dad's brain and see if I can't fix something." And she seems like she's on board for a little bit. Hill starts hitting her with the old dominate eyes. "I want you to call me Carl. I want you to feel like you can come to me if you need, anything, especially physical attention." And lays it on a little too thick. She wigs out and is like, "Fuck you. You don't have permission. I'm going to deal with this myself." He also denies the chance for her to go talk to her dad, which I think better spells out that he's a bad guy.
I do like that this fits with our theory that Megan Halsey is just immune to Arkham's weirdness. She resists the dominate.
Yeah.
She's like, no. I'm no, no, I'm not letting you touch me. I'm out of here. See ya. See ya. You're definitely trying to F me, and I ain't up for that.
Yeah. Sorry, John Kerry. I'm out. John Kerry don't care about consent, though, as we will find out to many degrees. He pulls Dean Halsey in for some tests and comes to the conclusion that Halsey's neck is broke, that Halsey's brainwaves are whack, and that despite the fact that Halsey's walking around, moving and stuff, Halsey is definitely dead. And puts two and two together and realizes that it's Herbert West is involved in this. So off he goes to Dan Kane's house, gets down into the basement and confronts West in the lab and says, "I know what you did, and I want you to tell me all of it, because just like I took your mentor's work and profited from it, I am now coming over here to um, appropriate your research and your discoveries, and those are now going to be my fame and fortune, and you're going to be my bitch, and you're going to be okay with it."
It's do you think it was just comic overconfidence on purpose? Or was it supposed to be he thought he was able to influence West to just be subservient to him? That's it. It seems like such a tragic miscalculation to go over to this unstable psychopath that can resurrect dead bodies and say, "I know what you've done, and now I'm saying that you're my bitch, and I'm going to turn my back to you immediately after that."
I dig Dr. Hill's hubris, and I absolutely believe that it's just pride and short-sightedness on his, like, he has no reason to believe that West is a murderer and that things will go the way that they do. And I do believe that he tries hitting him with his hypnotism, because he lays out, like, "You're going to show me your notes," which West does after West had just told him to fuck off and get out of the house. So he's got some limited success in imposing his will over West. "Okay, yeah, it turns out you're a genius." He starts, seeing dollar signs and is starstruck with the future he's going to have, being the savior of humanity and thwarting death. He says, "You're going to be my bitch. You're going to be my assistant. You'll get famous too, but I am definitely taking point on this. Also, we got to kill your little buddy Kane. He's going to disappear because he's inconvenient to all of this. Also, I want to hump his my coworker's daughter, and this guy's currently in the way, so that'll work on that." And when West like backs off as Hill's like looking the notes over, I don't know if you caught, but like he's got the tear going down his eye.
Oh no, I did not catch that.
Yeah. So like I think he's crazy, and that's part of the reason the dominate doesn't stick. He has his own iron will. And as we will find out later in the movie, and this is a part that gets cut, or actually maybe it already happened. No, it already happened. Um, like any good doctor, Herbert West has he's got an inconvenient little addiction. Did you see that in your scene?
No, no, I don't know what you're referencing.
He starts getting jittery as he's having a conversation with Kane,
Mm-hmm.
and we find out that Herbert West doesn't sleep anymore, and instead he's got some watered down reanimation juice that he injects himself with so he doesn't have to sleep.
Oh no, that was missing from my version. I don't know
Yeah,
why. That's odd.
and
It's
I
odd
think
that that specific detail was missing.
so. I think that explains a lot of West's inhuman decisions that he makes, and I think it might also play into how he's able to shrug off the hypnotisms of Hill. But as Hill's over there poring over the notes and reminiscing of his glorious future, if you liked the space pipe over the Nausicaan's head,
You'll love this. This is the combination of the shoot plus the biggest hit of the Nausicaan combined.
he grabs a shovel and, in a true World of Darkness fashion, gets up behind Dr. Hill and goes, "You know what? Fuck you. You don't come down to my reanimation lab and try and steal my notes, motherfucker.
Takes his head off. Takes
You're
his
not
head
the
off with
only
a
bad
shovel.
guy in this movie, you
Yeah,
asshole."
like nah. I mean, I'm a bad guy, but I'm not about to try and do what you're gonna do to Barbara Crampton. I'll have you know, sir. I'm a bad guy, but I have standards.
He busts Hill over the head with the shovel. Hill goes down. West finishes the job with the shovel and just cuts his head off.
Yeah,
Picks his head up, puts it on the table in a pan, keeps tipping over. I like he's got like a restaurant checkpointy thing.
yeah. It's
Jams it
like
in there,
probably
puts it.
something they got to rustled up to do the prop with too. Craft services, literally.
So these guys, you're sitting over here saying, what's the foolish short sightedness of Hill to come over and challenge West in his own laboratory? West is like, I'm going to turn you into a fucking science experiment. So far, let's see, I've reanimated whole people, but I haven't done parts of people. He hits Hill with the reanimation fluid in his brain, and then complicates things to a foolish degree as he goes down and takes Hill's body and gives that some reanimation juice in the heart, and then
He's
forgets about it.
he's just fucking with them. He's just like, I'm just gonna see what happens because fuck you. That's what I'm gonna use. I'm gonna get you conscious so you can see that I'm just fucking with you now.
Well, fucking's a two-way street because
It's for him. While Herbert West is a brilliant scientist and necromancer, he did rolled a critical fail on his perception check and got by the body he reanimated.
yeah. So now we've got this new character that enters the playing field, and that is Dr. Hill's body, which is like a man with shoulders and neck stump prosthetics on top, and it's just this lumbering body,
They
like
definitely
Dr. Satan's robot, right?
they definitely decided after they did the one scene with it this way, and they're like, "This sucks. We're gonna do a fake head on someone's body the next scene we're doing this." Like we're no, that was too much effort. That looked fucked up.
So Dr. Hill's body strangles West out, but doesn't kill him. Steals all his research, steals all the reanimation fluid, and goes back to our previously heavily used morgue set. And this is where we get this delightful scene where Dr. Hill's body, which now has the prosthetic, like, that teaching medical head where, like, you can pull all the parts of the brain and eyeball. So it's like wooden blocks. This thing is on Hill's body wearing a surgical mask and a hair cap. Slide past the security guard who's
Like
busy reading his porno mag.
like straight up Looney Tunes shit.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how else to describe it.
They get in there, start pouring blood in the pan. Some really cool shots of Dr. Hill's head in this tub as they just fill it up with blood. And
He like
his
is drinking it. It definitely starts you down the road of, man, Hill is fucked up. Hill is able to do some shit that like definitely no one can do. He's fully with what's going on and he's having difficulty communicating but not processing what's happening. You
and
know?
in fact, he starts doing like laser surgeries on the cadavers in there. At first, I thought they were going to like pull his brain out and put it in another body, and that's how he was going to get around. But we'll find out he's just doing surgery on all of the other morgue occupants. So again, Hill as a supernatural creature, I think makes sense. Everybody else who is touched by reanimation serum is feral to a certain extent, whereas Hill definitely keeps his sentience, uh, plots, plans, and is able to adeptly transition into his undead state despite the fact his head is not attached. So maybe at this point West has been able to refine the dosage where he hits the sweet spot, or maybe there's just something about Hill that gives him that extra edge to keep
Yeah,
going.
I think it's a supernatural element. You know, it's just he is something more, and so it's just having a different effect on him.
At this point, he's got uh, Dean Halsey lobotomized. This is before he gets his head chopped off. Was it?
Yeah, he lobotomized Dr. Halsey before his head was chopped off. It's something he did right
Um,
before I believe he went to go talk to West.
did your copy of the movie have the scene where Headless Hill goes to the observation room and dominates him through the glass?
Yes.
Mine did not.
Interesting.
Um, West wakes up in the basement, finds Kane, and goes, uh, I kind of fucked up and killed a man, but I didn't kill him. But I brought him back to life, and then he beat my ass, robbed us, and also he wants to kill you. Remember how we thought we were having a bad night? Well,
It got a lot worse.
it got a lot worse. But I've got a plan, and they're waiting around for Hill to show up. But then Kane realizes, like, wait, Hill's not going to go after us. He's going to go after Megan, and he runs off to go meet with his girlfriend, finds her in her house, confesses, like, hey, so about your dad, he's not like insane. He's dead, and we reanimated him. And also, we've done a lot more damage. Let me try and catch up on this. And about that time, the
Well, that's when
golem.
they're having their heartfelt relationship conversation about like we can endure these hardships
I
together.
wanted to hate you,
Yeah,
since you
like
killed my dad and reanimated him and have ruined our fucking lives. But I really love you.
yes. And that's where I was like, oh man, really? Like that just feels like that was just so poorly done. But no, man, you're correct. It was perfectly done. It was perfectly done.
It's about that time that the golem of Dean Hazley, like, punches in the fucking door straight up Thriller style and starts rampaging. I think Kane might get knocked out or something, or I don't know how
Yeah.
they get separated, but Halsey abducts his daughter, brings her back to the morgue, and so begins a bad time for Barbara Crampton.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to believe
So 1985.
this is something this was real. This happened.
Things that will not happen at big studios. Uh,
No.
and really, you didn't see stuff like this other than horror, like cheap horror movies, right?
Yeah.
The nudity and I'd say this is exploitation, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So Halsey gets thrown to the table next to Dr. Hill's severed head as he's laying in this blood like I fucking her. And she gets strapped to the operating gurney
Our clothes
by,
are removed.
yeah, they rip the clothes off. And now it's like, hey, remember how we were like doing playful side boob when she was in the bedroom with her boyfriend? Here's like just full on booby time, followed by the headless body of Dr. Hill just groping her up.
Yeah, just clumsily just grabbing at her titties.
And you can see like the telepathic connection between Hill's body and his head, because he's like, the hands are going on her boobs, and like Hill's head's like, oh, this is, my dreams come true. And I'm like, okay. And then uh, Hill like starts monologuing in his like raggedy zombie-ish evil lich way. They His body picks, and this is all while like Dean Halsey's corpse is watching.
Yes.
And then he picks up the head, and the head's like licking her cheek, like, "Oh, I loved you. I've always loved you." And you're like, "All right." And then he starts sucking on her boobs.
Yep.
And you're like, "John Kerry, what are you doing?"
That's when you're like, that. I can't emphasize this enough if you've never seen it. It's really this actor licking the boobs of this other actor.
Who's like a third of his age, I'm sure.
Yeah, and right there, like they're shooting, they're doing it. This Barbara Crampton is having her tongue, her boobie licked by this random middle aged British character actor.
While blood and like gore is dripping everywhere, and you're like, "Oh, okay." And then did your version have like the body pick the head up and then just like move it between her legs as he like goes down on her?
Yep.
Yeah, boobs and bush, man. 85 horror.
It's just that's what happens. What you
So now,
described is what happens.
while her dad watches, her zombie
Yeah.
dad watches. So that goes on for a while as she
Yeah.
has her worst day. What's her commentary in the stuff you saw?
The one I saw was from maybe, gosh, maybe even been more than 10 years ago, where it was, I would be interested in maybe that her opinion has changed, right? Because a lot of perspective on this stuff changed over this period, but it was very like, no, very clinical. Like we had all planned this out from the start. We knew what we were doing, we knew this was going to be completely fucked up. That was entirely the point, that was the attitude she had. Was I was in on it, which I guess you have to. There's
Yeah,
just no way, not even in 1985, can you be like, listen, Barbara, are you sure? Like, this is what we want to do.
her story is interesting too. Like her dad was a carny, so she grew up traveling with the circus. Um, and she's got a pretty good pedigree of like daytime TV, but then yeah, a lot of B horror scream queen stuff. So, uh, you know, I've been in movies, horror movies and stuff. I see the discussions, and they're all pretty upfront with like, this is where the script's going, this is what we're doing, and it's not going to be creepy on set, but we wanted to come off creepy on film. Again, things you're not seeing in horror movies anymore.
No.
While this is going on, Herbert Kane shows up, starts dropping some smack talk, gets Hill to pay attention to him. And Hill's like, hey, it's real stupid of you to come to my lair now. Guess what? I've been preparing for you. Thanks for spending, not making me have to come find you. By the way, here's my zombie army.
Yes, and literally all the corpses in the morgue stand up, and now they've got to like 3-on-12 against all of these zombies. It's actually like kind of the weakest part of the movie is this weird fight scene that breaks out. That's it's at first it's just an excuse to get a lot of gore effects on screen, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like these guys are snotty, they're gross,
They're
they're
burned up.
gooey, they're burnt up, a lot of
They're naked.
makeup, they're naked, they're flopping around.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's supposed to be like kind of fucked up, and you get that, but it's also very like not coordinated, you know?
For as sloppy as it was, and logistically a fight this lopsided, like not feasible, I still thought it flowed pretty well. It's dark, it's chaotic. Some sort of chemical gets thrown on the ground, a fire starts, shit gets real wild. At a certain point, Dean Halsey's zombified, lobotomized golem remnant snaps out of it as his daughter is being slowly murdered, and he flips over to the good side. He has this Tron moment.
Yeah, it's I'll fight for the users.
Yes.
Like, he recognizes his daughter as his daughter long enough to start fighting the other zombies. It's probably the
uh,
only hopeful thing that happens in the movie.
yeah. Herbert West's big idea wasn't to bring a shotgun, it was to bring more reanimation juice and hit West's body with it. I'm sorry, Hill's body with it, thinking it's going to OD him. Instead, it like turns Hill's body into like tentacle manga.
Yeah, like it turns it into a portal to like another plane of existence, and some literal Cthulhu tentacles are now shooting out of this breach.
Or maybe this is like the Star Trek Picard connection here at the end of season 1 where, like,
Oh, yeah, bring it
the
all the way
Reapers
around.
start coming out with their tentacles and they snatch up West. Um Again, the fire starts consuming the morgue. I think Hill's head actually gets crushed
I believe
by I think it was Halsey grabs his head and starts crushing it, rips his eyeballs out. As he
correct.
rips his eyes, all of the zombified minions that West had, or that Hill had under his mind control, they all start grabbing their eyes in this sympathetic agony. Again, so many vampire LARP terms apply perfectly to this movie. It's almost as though there's a heavy influence.
And then I think the last zombie that ends up being a problem is the one that grabs Barbara Crampton in the elevator as they're trying to escape.
Well, but
Because
as they're trying to escape, though,
West gets pulled into the void by the tentacle
West
monster.
gets wrapped up by the tentacle monster that used to be Hill's torso, and his apparent dying action is to grab his research and throw it to Kane. And again, this is good character insight into West. He's not concerned about his own life. He is concerned about the work. He wants his work, his notes, the serum to persist even though his life is ending. Throws it to Kane. Kane and Megan try to get out. Burned one-armed guy comes over, starts crushing Megan's throat. And that's when Kane decides to do silly horror movie things. And instead of just like get the guy's hand off his girlfriend's throat, he runs all the way up the hill, all the way up the hall, finds the fireman's axe, which that would have been a great thing to bring into like your boss fight.
You're about to go fight a man you know is a zombie. Why did you not take the axe you literally passed on the way?
Yeah. His headless body strangled your friend and stole all the notes. Like, something is real fucky here. You're going to kill this guy. Good. How do you walk by this axe or originally go, nah, I don't
Nah,
need that.
nah, I don't need that at all.
Why would I need a fucking axe? It's just a guy who had his head cut off already. Comes back with the axe, cuts the arm off, gets Megan upstairs. The hospital's in chaos. There's smoke everywhere. People see Megan covered in blood, get her up on the operating table, and we've got a throwback to the beginning of the movie where Kane is trying to save a woman's life. That same teaching doctor is there. They start trying the compressions. They start trying the defibrillator. It's no good. Megan's throat has been crushed and she's dead.
It is a shame that she kind of like died weak. Like she just kind of got choked for a while. There wasn't like anything that was very clearly like fatal that happened. It's just she just kind of fell unconscious, and then this is the end. It was a little. I don't know if I like that choice. I think they could have done something there to make it more clear, because it didn't seem like a threat. It didn't seem like the climax of the movie. You know what I mean?
Well, here's the thing, Joe.
After this tentacle monster a few seconds before, I was like expecting something else.
Yeah, but listen, nobody wants an ugly zombie girlfriend. And as she lays there dead, Dan Kane, who has at this point now drank all of the Kool-Aid, encounters a page in the Choose Your Own Adventure book where it says you're looking at the body of your dead fiance because she has accepted his marriage proposal. If you let her go, this is the end. You're going to be sad and, I don't know, probably go to jail at some point. Or if you would like to use the reanimation serum, turn to page 85. He turns to page 85. We fade to black with the reanimation fluid staying in focus as he injects her skull. Several seconds later, we hear her death wail as she is rebirthed, and the role of Re-Animator has now been passed along. So yeah, had she had her like chest ripped out and her fucking heart bit by the zombie or some other ugly shit, that's a much less viable reanimation target for Kane, but
I think so. They did a much better job with a very similar death when the zombie killed her dad, and then she got beat. He got beat against the wall, and he looked dead. You know what I
mhm.
mean? Like he looked like he got his like just beaten to death by this man. Where this was just kind of like a light choking in an elevator. You know, the intensity wasn't there at a level where I was like, "Oh, she's fucking dead." Oh, okay. You know,
Well, I think there's only so much physical violence you can get away with. Sexual assault is fine and
fairly
dandy,
fine. Yeah, but
but you
physical
don't.
violence, yeah,
You, you're not, especially not for the innocent female protagonist.
that's probably a good point. You can't really do a stunt woman there, so it's like you don't want to hurt your lead either.
And
So
also, too, she still looks like things could be fine. Like reading past the silly comedy or 80s moviness to it, like it's not like something terrible has happened and she is traumatically and irreversibly dead. Like you look at her laying on the table, and in his mind, she's fine. Like it looks like she could just open up her eyes. Why not give her the chance? What could go wrong, right? That sweet seduction, that slippery slope of why this stuff is bad. So that's where the movie wraps. Is with Herbert West presumably dead, Dan Kane now the Re-Animator, and Megan Halsey coming back to see what her dad got to go through himself.
shockingly enjoyable to watch. Amazing how much craft there was in a movie that cheap. You know,
Oh
like
yeah, profit.
the production of this movie, while definitely budget, is never cheap. You know what I mean? They definitely deliver a high quality product, but with limited parts.
The horror is certainly there. The sci-fi is certainly there. The mystic supernatural elements, while not explicitly stated, are there if you know what to look for. The comedy again becomes this lubrication that moves you through big leaps that the characters are making that defy logic, or get us through what would be silly scenes to move the story forward. Again, I think all the actors hit their mark on what they're being asked to do. I really, really like this thing. Uh, it was a gem to be able to go back and watch. There's two more of these. There's Bride of Re-Animator, and then Beyond Re-Animator. And I think both of those actually have Jeffrey Combs. This was 85. I think Bride was 1990, and then Beyond Re-Animator was 2003.
Oh, that one might be in the danger zone then. I could buy a 1990 sequel, Bride of Re-Animator. That sounds like it probably had enough of the original juice to be worth watching. But 2003, that was when you got into the area to shovelware on DVD. That's
Yeah.
when shit got real cheap and got real bad. I do not have any hope that a 2003 third sequel to Re-Animator was anything but garbage, especially 18 years after the fact.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to find out because I've located them, and I wish that I had not watched this the day before us doing the filming, because I think I would have tried to sneak the two follow ups in there. You know, all these 80s horror movies, like you hit gold and then you get greedy and you try to go back to the well and get the audience in to spend more money. And I think a lot of times it's hard to get lightning back in the bottle, or whatever made that first movie special you had to destroy in the process to tell the story the way you did. Like you're either going to retread or you're going to try to recreate a ridiculous situation. It's not going to come off. So I'll be curious to see how those go. But a lot of these franchise horror things, Hellraisers, Friday the 13th,
They don't work.
Halloween's.
They kind of fall apart. And like this movie is so not made to have a real sequel, especially one with Jeffrey Combs in it. That just makes no sense, right? Like I don't think Bride of Re-Animator will necessarily be great, but I would be willing to watch it if this turns out to have been a fun adventure for everyone to go on. I enjoyed talking about this with you, Peter.
I do too. I think this is a fun departure
Yeah.
from Star Trek. I mean, everything we have done, and I guess that's really our theme, is it's all sci-fi, tank girl, Trek, now this. But again, real sweet spot to my interest and a fun examination of things that normally we don't get to go in these dark directions. I would say anybody out there who has not seen it and has obviously spoiled the shit out of it. But even having spoiled the shit out of it, like, go back and watch this thing. It's a fucking peach. Seeing practical effects,
Yeah.
especially as we're in the heyday of like Enterprise. For anybody listening to this thing down the road, we had just reviewed that goddamn piece of shit Extinction.
Ugh.
But with the, knowing how much horror and stuff is just CG at this point, seeing these old 80s special effects where it's rubber masks and real, goopy blood, it feels good. It feels reassuring. You can, again, respect the craft, the ingenuity that goes into to framing this stuff, and just the excellent reuse of the same 5 sets over and over again. A+ job.
Yeah, good movie on a budget and a classic B movie. Something you don't really get anymore. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks again to our patrons. We'll see you again later.